One of these films is frequently listed as one of the best films of the silent era, and features the signature performance from silent icon Lon Chaney. The other film was Universal's attempt to update their cash cow, making it the first adaptation of the novel to be filmed in full colour, and the first English language adaptation to be filmed with sound in mind. But which is the best? Lord knows that Gaston Leroux's novel, The Phantom of the Opera, has been adapted a terrifying amount of times, for the big screen alone. So, in a similar vein to my reviews of The Most Dangerous Game, I will just be focusing on the two adaptations that share the most DNA. The 1925 and 1943 movies were produced by Universal, and both are considered to be part of the studio's classic Monsters series. Beyond these couple of films, there are several other interesting adaptations, I must confess. These span from the likes of Hammer Horror to Robert Englund, all the way to Gerard Goddamn Butler. This is opera! I already shone a spotlight on the Chinese adaptation, Song at Midnight, but maybe I'll get to the rest one day. For now, though,
I'm a busy man.
Besides, I can't risk reviewing the musical and getting Andrew Lloyd Webber's tasty beats stuck in my head again. You haven't lived until you've been rejected by the love of your life, sitting in a darkened room at 3 in the morning, necking copious amounts of vodka, and spamming the volume controls, listening to the point of no return. It will make the hairs on your arms stand to attention, amongst other things. Without further ado, let's jump back almost an entire century to the year 1925. From the first frames of footage, what immediately draws your attention are the lavish sets. Meticulously crafted to replicate sections of the real Paris Opera House, the set was the first in the industry to be built with steel, and was kept around for a very, very long time, and reused for countless productions since, including the 1943 remake. The stage was finally dismantled in 2014, but the surviving Opera House sets have been preserved in storage, making them the oldest surviving movie set structures. Majestic, extravagant, they set the scene perfectly here, transporting you into a world of high society and splendour. This production was unsurprisingly costly for Universal, but it paid off. The contrast between the bright and awe-inspiring Opera House and the later scenes of the Phantom's darkened dwellings is perfect. As if it isn't classy enough, they launched a film with an extended ballerina dance sequence, led by the niece of Universal Studios founder, Carl Laemmle. Now, I won't pretend to be an expert on the techniques of good ballet or nepotism, but the choreography is satisfying to watch, and again, further situates you into this environment before the story later casts a shadow over everything. We move behind the scenes, where a deal is being finalised. The two men on the left are the giddy new owners of the establishment, while the other two, the previous owners, are acting suspicious. After the notary is sealed, and some coats and hats have been grabbed, the dodgy men turn back, gleefully revealing that there may be rumblings of a ghost in the building. Dickheads, that's just sleazy business. If only they had Nathan Fielder around to confirm the property was free of haunting spirits beforehand. Damn it. No matter, the new owners laugh the bastards out of the door. Alas, they will not have the last laugh. As they venture through their newly purchased opera house, we all slowly learn the extent of this ghoulish gossip. This is one of the film's greatest achievements. Imagine an empty jug. Now imagine that details of this mysterious villain are being poured into the jug at a steady but constant rate. Eventually, imagine the jug is being filled to the brim, spilling over with pent-up excitement to finally see this character. Right, it's not quite John Lennon. Jug, but you get my point. Maybe. First, there are the mutterings of the weirdo in box 5. Then, we see him ominously from behind. Very still, very quiet, with a collar that has no right being as threatening as it is. Fucking massive. Using tricks that are still repeated in horror films to this day, the men run away, but return almost instantly, but the figure has now vanished completely.
trust him.
It's hard to keep him out, and here is his stubborn as humor.
Boasting another early use of overdone cliches, a startled stagehand prepares to meet his doom, but instead meets a cat. It is overdone now, yes, but the message is clear. Everyone working in this opera house is living in constant terror. This point is accentuated moments later when a gaggle of ballerinas are terrorized backstage by an antivirus mascot. Suspicious activity has certainly been detected. Everyone gathers to discuss the nature of this villain, constructing some serious mystique for the audience. His eyes are ghastly beads, in which there is no light, like holes in a grinning skull. His face is like leprous parchment, yellow skin strung tight over protruding bones. He has no nose. How does he smell? Awful! Ian McKellen's Mini-Me is so scared, he leaps right out of this movie and straight into a Buster Keaton farce. While this nonsense occurs, the Phantom has been busy, leaving little notes around. He promises disaster if an up-and-coming young singer named Christine Daae is not brought in to replace current singer Carlotta. Carlotta's mother insists her daughter will be singing at the next show, but lo and behold, Carlotta is suddenly taken ill. Thus, it is Christine that rises out of the ground, quite literally angelic, like Goldmember's wet dream. Christine's boyfriend, Raoul, is having much the same experience, watching from among the crowds. After the performance, he proposes marriage. Christine rejects him in a very forward-thinking manner, being all like, "I ain't gonna let no man stand in the way of my career. Later, bitches!" The rejected Raoul sulks away, and that is when a most angelic voice reveals itself to Christine.
Christine, tonight I place the world at your feet. To you, I have imparted the full measure of my art. You will triumph. All Paris will worship you. But I warn you, you must forget all worldly things and think only of your clay and your master.
Christine doesn't need to be told twice. Look at that face. Raoul, who? Her singing teacher who hides in the shadows is far more stimulating. I agree, as we are all treated to the next element of the Phantom, getting a better look at him and his unusual features. Yet, still in shadow. After leaving further letters all over the place like he's the bloody Phantom of the post office, he again warns that a curse will befall them all if Carlotta returns to sing instead of Christine. Thankfully for us, Carlotta isn't taking any more shit from this unseen bully, and instead takes to the stage. The game is afoot. The suspense is ratcheting up. Everyone is in good spirits, but the scene goes on and on. You're just waiting for terror to strike. And then, the lights go all fuzzy. Nobody can explain it. And then the Phantom emerges in shadow to, "Oh my god! Shield your eyes, kids, don't look!" In an act of absolute delightful callousness, the Phantom cries out,
Behold, she is singing to bring down the chandelier.
The owners drop the ball, so he drops the whole chandelier, which is the perfect metaphor for the opera house's extravagance, on the audience. Death by upper-class lighting fixtures, hell yeah! The Paris Opera House becomes the Paris Madhouse, as everyone scrambles for safety. During this calamity, Christine is whisked away for a kinda two-way mirror. Let's not dwell on the implications, please. Instead, let us take our first look at the Phantom's mask.
Hey, what did you expect?
Realistically, she is already spooked. He looks like a half-finished dummy.
Hey,
Through his trademark smooth talking, he still manages to convince Christine to be lured down deeper through the catacombs and sewers, on foot, by boat, and by horse. Pro tip for any young ladies watching this double review of vintage Phantom adaptations, of which I'm sure there are many. On a night out, if a guy offers to take you to his place via a horse through the sewers, maybe politely decline. Nevertheless, enjoy some more fantastic production design down in these dirty depths. Christine, to her credit, quickly realises she should have taken my advice and trusted her instincts. This lad is bad news. He keeps getting up on her grill, raving about his passionate love for her. This is creepy enough, but the fact that we've helplessly observed just how very, very far away he's taken her hammers it home. Christine is completely and utterly trapped with this dude who sleeps in a coffin, partly because it reminds him of the sweet painless finality of death, and partly for fun. Chaney plays it amazingly. I love the way he casually lingers against the wall as Christine freaks out over his bed of choice. He's just like, yep, here we go, I knew this would happen. Oh, why didn't I buy a race car bed? He follows through with every red flag comment uttered by every predatory lonely boy who's ever existed. He claims her love, and her love alone will somehow cure all of his problems. She faints. Understandable. The air down there is probably ranker than a dank skank swank bank. Speaking of which, he puts Christine to bed, and instead of insulting her, he correctly bashes out his sexual frustration on the pipes. I've seen a few sad organ wanks in my time. This is one of the best.
I awoke several hours later in a daze.
Can you believe it? The king of demanding letters is at it again. The Phantom, whose name is Eric by the way, nice name. The Phantom states that she will be in no peril unless she touches the mask on his face. Well, god damn it, Eric, you flipping numbskull. Haven't you ever heard of the Streisand effect? If it ruined Beyonce, it will sure as shit ruin you too. Consumed by curiosity, Christine sneaks up on the Phantom and helps create one of the most iconic scenes in film history. Ugh! Sorry, let's try that again. Ugh! Sorry. There we go. 45 minutes of non-stop build-up to reveal what is still to this day a pretty fucking horrifying image. Lon Chaney was almost as famous for his makeup work as he was for his acting. The Phantom's face of pure horror was his design, and included some implementations that sounded as horrific to apply as it is to look at. Much of it was achieved through a combination of carefully applied paints shot under certain lighting arrangements. On top, he wore a skull cap that elongated his forehead and made his balding head really shine. Chaney wanted to create a skeletal appearance, as is described in the source material, so he painted his eye sockets black, finished with some white highlights. His ears were then glued back against his head, his cheeks were stuffed with wadding, his lips soaked in grease paint, and his teeth overlaid with a false set that were crafted to appear rotten. His mouth was then held open with prongs to keep that grisly smile in place at all times. The worst of it came with the deforming of the nose. Putty was used to form a more sinister nose, then wires were attached underneath in each nostril so that the whole extremity could be shifted into a tilted up angle. Reportedly, the wires often caused the actor to bleed. Ugh, it's not a process I'd happily subject myself to, but at the same time, here we are, almost 100 years later, still excitedly gushing over it. So yeah, fair enough. Makeup aside, even as a performance, Chaney really brings his A-game. The shock reveal is incredible, but it is the lingering stare and sharp judgmental finger that sustains the moment and sends chills down my spinal column. The unsteady, broken approach towards the utterly terrified Christine, the glistening white pinholes of his monstrous eyes, the sudden switch to mad cackling evil, the full extent of his pent-up wrath threatening to unleash upon the only thing he has ever loved, before succumbing to sadness. This right here is one of the greatest scenes in horror history. The Phantom lets Christine go, on the basis that she never sees Raoul ever again, yada yada yada. She disobeys this order at once, as indeed she should. Raoul doesn't seem like such a bad option now when compared to Captain Deathface. They agree to meet up at the masquerade, paper faces on parade. It is quite the party, for both the revelers and for the audience. You see, the footage turns as fancy as its guests by adopting a two-tone Technicolor extravaganza. It was an appropriate choice on Universal's part. As relatively primitive as this technique was, it allows all of the fabulous costume designs to really pop and sparkle. It brings the whole thing to life, and maintains the strong quality set by the previous Phantom scene. The Phantom, though, he ain't done. Of course he comes back to steal the show yet again. Striding down that grand staircase in a blood-red outfit, the very image of death itself is marvellous. It is unusual for horror villains to be so stylish. Take note, Michael Myers, when's the last time you washed those fucking overalls anyway?
Keep
Christine's
name out your fucking mouth!
My behavior was unacceptable, and I'm here whenever you're ready to talk.
The following scene on the rooftop was achieved with a different colouring process, the Hanshigo process to be exact. It created artificial colours through use of dyes applied to black and white images. In this instance, it gives us another beautifully ugly image that will remain in your brain. That is, if you can avoid getting distracted by the impressive stone cleavage. Oh, steady on, Mr. Golem, steady! The remaining half hour of the film is packed full of action and intrigue. The Phantom re-kidnaps Christine and tests where her loyalties truly lie. A bit like Emperor Palpatine, but with added scorpion nozzles. Yes, good, good. Raoul and a policeman strive to rescue her. To avoid getting caught out by Eric's evil lasso, they walk around with their hands at the level of their faces. Yeah, this just makes them look like stiff action figures getting ready to show off their amazing chopping action. It is good advice though. I walk around like that everywhere in public, just in case. The pair of heroes get tricked into a variety of death traps. They almost drown. They almost get killed by insufferable heat. Exciting enough, I suppose. But it does start to detract from the main focus, which is Christine and Eric. Because on top of all of that, there's more. The workers above decide they've had enough of Captain Deathface leaving these letters all over the place, making a fucking mess, and they rather slowly launch a fire torch mutiny. The action culminates with an admittedly thrilling chase sequence. Eric commandeers the hero's horse-drawn carriage. Pursued by the angry mob, as would be tradition for Universal's monsters, he rides through the streets of Paris, revisiting some of Chaney's old hunchback haunts, before the chase ends with a big old crash.
Crash! Bang! Wallop! What a video!
Christine and her man make their escape, while the Phantom is cornered by the river, beaten to death, and then tossed into the water. Farewell. Originally, the ending was much simpler and subdued. After a pity kiss, the Phantom died of a broken heart. Test audiences from the previews responded very negatively, citing this as an anticlimax. I get what they're saying, but it does resonate with that wonderful unmasking scene, where the cardiac failure almost got him then and there. So, Universal understandably scrambled to rejig the whole climax. A revised script saw Eric still stealing and crashing the carriage, before using his nifty murder weapon lasso to escape up a bridge. Ho ho, plot twist, one of the workers is waiting atop and cuts the lasso. Eric would plummet to the ground, and issue some immortal final words.
All I wanted was to have a wife like anybody else, and to take her out on Sundays.
A beautiful sentiment for this villain, or any villain for that matter. All I wanted was to have a wife like anybody else, and to take her out on Sundays. In retrospect, the ending they chose is probably the correct choice. I adore the Phantom's last little game. He holds up a closed fist, warning them away. Stay back! Stay back! They flinch, but the Phantom reveals an empty palm. He's all out of tricks, and he cackles away, knowing that the end is nigh, but that he still pulled one last gag on these fools. If we ignore the fact that some of the mob seemingly dive into the water for no reason, it is another top-notch, memorable moment. The early previews in January 1925 didn't just throw up disappointment with the ending, but the response was very negative on the whole. The on-set production, despite all the glitz and glamour, was apparently a nightmare too. Director Rupert Julian was allegedly a pain in the backside to work with, and caused a very tense atmosphere on set. He and Chaney became enemies at once, and were eventually not on speaking terms. Any notes that the director had for Chaney came through second-hand parties, but Chaney paid them no mind. Norman Kerry, the actor who played Raoul, ended up charging at the director's stage in fury, knocking over expensive bulky cameras in the process. Other members of the cast and crew gossiped and mocked Julian as a surefire way to gain favour with their colleagues. After the bad previews, the director was replaced with Edward Sedgwick, but then he too was replaced, when Universal was still dissatisfied with the reshoots and the new edits. The third uncredited director was a woman, but I forget her name because I'm obviously a misogynist pig. Trying to find her name online seems to be an impossible task as well, because history is full of misogynist pigs. All these reshoots and re-edits and big sets and a famous star at the forefront meant the Phantom of the Opera was a very costly risk for Universal. A risk that paid off? The film ended up grossing over $2 million and was enjoyed by audiences and critics alike, but Universal wanted more from the Phantom. More! In the years after, the studio concocted two plans to ride the wave of this unprecedented success. Lon Chaney ultimately stood in the way of both plans. Firstly, the concept for a sequel inevitably made its way to the table, but Chaney had already signed new contracts with rival studio MGM. Without Chaney as the star, the project was wisely scrapped. The other idea would churn new revenue out of the already completed film. Sound cinema began in 1927, and it wasn't unusual for popular films to be refitted for sound, so Phantom was a no-brainer. However, Chaney had very little interest in this new era of talkies and refused. To make matters worse, his contract stated he was also not allowed to be directly dubbed over by another voice artist. But this time, Universal weren't so keen to roll over and cut their losses. They continued on with the sound edition and bypassed Chaney's contractual rules by only dubbing the Phantom's lines in third person, when the character was either off-screen or in shadow. Therefore, Chaney's lips were never being directly synced. This version released in 1930 and once again proved to be a hit, earning a further $419,000. The double whammy winnings from this horror property gave the studio the confidence to capitalize on the horror genre, and the rest is history. To conclude this section on the 1925 silent classic, I think the film is exactly that, a silent classic. Controversial statement, I know. Even if the third act is a tad bloated, it still remains one of my absolute favourites of the decade. But what happened with the Phantom after Universal struck gold time and time again with other gothic horror material? By the mid-30s, Universal was the go-to studio for horror. Their monster movies were constantly bringing home the dough. Why rob a bank when you could just throw some more makeup on Boris Karloff and make him grunt a little? The temptation to produce a proper talky version of Phantom was too great to ignore. Development began around 1934 or 1935. The script added a fresh new angle on the original story. The Phantom would now be a veteran of World War I, whose disfigurements were actually imagined due to severe PTSD. That would have been a really interesting take, but unfortunately the project was shelved due to the emerging ban on horror films in Britain, and because Carl Laemmle was removed from Universal via hostile takeover. When the studio regained confidence in the genre in 1939, it didn't take long for the Phantom's shadow to reappear. Development on a remake restarted in 1941, but the 1935 treatment was scrapped.
It's an outrage.
Likely due to the world now being deep in the throes of another world war. Henry Costa was hired to helm this new adaptation, and he was eager to stir things up even further in terms of story. Bored of the usual Beauty and the Beast romantic spin, he envisioned the Phantom to now be Christine's estranged father. Elements of Costa's script remained after he was fired and replaced with Arthur Lubin.
I'm the captain now.
But the whole father-daughter angle was shoved deep down in the bin. The studio heads feared it concocted incestuous undertones. No shit! Those aren't undertones, mate, those are full-on overtones. The role of the Phantom was much coveted, and the casting needed to be spot on, or else the entire project would be at risk again. Karloff was considered, as he presumably was for every single horror role that ever existed. When I first discovered the 1943 film, I was initially disappointed to learn that the son of the original actor, Lon Chaney Jr., did not adopt his father's most famous role. It would seem fitting, and the actor was in Universal's good graces at the time, due to the success of The Wolfman. Apparently, Chaney Jr. did actually express strong interest in the role, but the producers never seriously considered him a contender. A damn shame, I say, though to be fair, the actor who ultimately received the job wasn't exactly a poor choice either. Claude Rains, Universal's Invisible Man, was cast to play this very different iteration of the character. The film eventually released in 1943 and held the honour of being the first colour version of the Phantom of the Opera. It used free-strip Technicolor, which again made production a bit of a struggle, but at least this time nobody was charging into cameras and shit.
Norman Carey attack.
The requirements for filming with this technique meant the stage became very hot, with a huge amount of lighting setups needed and heavy layers of makeup being applied to the ever-sweating cast. But again, Universal's troubles paid off. From the grand opening scene, the look and the feel of the Opera House is engagingly vibrant, making the 1925 film look like a tinted back alley saloon in comparison. The direction feels showy too, especially coming right off the other film. Then again, it's not as showy as this bloody baritone. Calm it down, son. Give someone else a chance. Shut the fuck up. Christine was now played by Susanna Foster, who, being a promising star on the rise with some very impressive vocal talents, was essentially playing herself. Now, back in 1925, there was a critical love triangle that sat at the centre of the story. Christine was loved by both Raoul and the Phantom. Universal must have been like, oh shit, we need to up our game here. Bigger and better. We don't need a love triangle, we need a love square.
Yeah!
Christine is being wooed by Raoul, the Phantom, and now also the aforementioned bloody baritone bastard. Yes, we get it. I'm pretty confident that all the other old geezers working there have the hots for her too. Fuck it, all the dancers probably do too. Everybody loves Raymond? Bullshit. Everybody loves Christine. It's mad. They stumble about in desperation, lust, and envy. Who was that man you're talking to?
Well, he's Inspector Raoul Daubert of the Sûreté.
Inspector? You meet a policeman?
Yeah, I wonder what the fuck gave that one away. Raoul and Baritone Bill are incessantly pining over her, getting stuck in doorways together every 5 seconds to get to her. And they keep saying the same statements over each other, like the fucking Animal Crossing raccoons.
Oh.
Good morning, Christine.
May I come in,
Christine?
Christine,
Christine,
if I might have a word
with you.
My carriage is
outside.
I wager that Universal were trying to add some His Girl Friday style levity to the tragic proceedings, but it is just so repetitive that it grates my balls. Go through the fucking door! Neither of you deserve Christine. Maybe you should try a different, quieter approach. Speaking of which, we first meet the Phantom as a quote-unquote regular human being. Ooh, already my interest is being tickled. He is now Eric Claudin, a senior violinist who has worked at the Paris Opera House for decades, quietly doing his job, not making much of an impression on anyone really. Trouble is, he's now approaching 50 years of age, and arthritis is tempering his musical ability. Honestly, he appears to be a very friendly and gentlemanly dude, if a little shy and lonely. His affection for Christine is as obvious as my distaste for Baritone Bill. But he's kinda awkward with her. Oh, don't worry, Claudine, I feel your pain. Care to join me at 3 AM for vodka and the Point of No Return sing-alongs? Past the point of no return.
Bang.
This film could be renamed Claudin and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. After fluffing his moment with Christine, he is regretfully fired due to his arthritis. He shuffles home to his dark, cramped, rented apartment, where he's hounded by his landlady for the rent. She doesn't get it either. How can you work at a prestigious Paris opera house, yet can't pay the rent, and can only afford the peasant meal deluxe each evening? It's a mystery, and I am hooked. Turns out, the sweet old man has been secretly paying for Christine's tutelage, single-handedly giving her a career. After revealing his employment woes, he begs for Christine's teachings to continue, out of good faith, but again he is rejected. He claims he's written a proper sick concerto, bruv, that will knock the socks off every maestro in the 9th district.
I have written a concerto.
Every violinist has written a concerto.
Once that concerto makes it big, he'll come back and pay his way.
If you don't mind me saying so, you are a fool.
But he doesn't hear back from the publishers, so he goes and checks in on his magnum opus. But guess what? Yep. The powers that be state that the concerto pages are where they belong. In the bin! Harsh. Really harsh. But then, Claudan hears his music being played, and claims shenanigans. He's wrong. He doesn't know it. It isn't theft at all. A visiting composer, Maestro Quaker Oates, is listening to it nearby, and is actually quite the fan. Alas.
Thief.
In a fit of rage,
Thief!
he commits murder, but is scarred in the face with acid. Oh, Claudan, if only you had waited 5 more minutes, my boy. But honestly, the shit has been piling up on his head for a long time. So I get it. Tragically, we watch him descend into the sewers, where he will continue to stew in madness and rage. And yes, burning desire for Christine. This new backstory completely changes how I relate to the Phantom. Chaney's version was monstrous and scary from the off, and continued to be so until the end, although it was underlined with some pity along the way. Rain's version is not scary to me. The pity dominates the performance. While this does make me like the character more, it is vastly less terrifying. Therefore, depending on what you're looking to extract from your Phantom experience, horror or tragedy, your mileage may vary depending on which film you watch. It is halfway through the runtime when we eventually catch up with the starting point of the typical Phantom story. Between Claudan's scarring and his re-emergence to blackmail Carlotta, you get a lot of opera. A lot of opera. I know it's the Phantom of the opera, so I shouldn't be shocked, but it does drag on a bit. Hey, at least the production is immaculate. Anywho, yes, rumours of a ghost begin to swirl, but we know who the ghost is, unlike last time.
Surprise, cockbags!
And so they play it for comedy. Gone are the long, dramatic descriptions of terror. All we've got now is one guy who just keeps referring to the ghost's long nose and massive red beard.
A great big bushy beard!
Like the door antics, this pantomime soon outstays its welcome, and the payoff is not nearly as rip-roaring as they think it is. It's not all bad. The opera staff in general have a lot more character than what they had before. There is some joy to be had watching them flitter about, panicking about the Phantom, ranting about pâté and pig's feet.
Pickled pig's feet.
Whereas the virgin Lon Chaney hid like a coward and dropped little notes around, the Chad Claude Rains shows up in person to deliver his threats. I'm still not scared of him, but I do like how he uses this tragedy to become a supervillain of sorts. The voice and the performance are comparable to his Invisible Man shtick.
She didn't know how much I love you. Now she knows.
It is not the voice of a beast, but one shimmering with delusion and insanity, drunk on newfound power. Visually, he even seems more stylish, with that combination of mask, costume and hair quiff. Hoo-hoo boy! He kills both of them in cold blood and makes his escape, before we are invited to watch more Love Square business for a while.
Madame Biancaroli and her maid have been murdered.
Murdered?
Did I stutter?
Oh shit, hold on guys. Here comes the chandelier scene. I bet it's going to be mental this time. 2 things of note here. Seeing the Phantom go at it with a hacksaw is terribly less exciting than the original Phantom's quick and shadowy attack. Secondly, it takes him a bloody long time to cut through that shit. This video is really starting to drag on, Claudan. We'll check in on you later, okay? See how you're getting on. Bye! I have seen a few people criticise the original film for keeping the famous unmasking scene in the middle of the narrative, similar to how many lambast Jaws, and state it's not scary after the shark's revealed. They feel all the momentum is lost too early in the picture. They want the unmasking to be saved till the end. I disagree on both Phantom and Jaws, but it is a curious concept to consider regardless. In the remake, because the main plot as we know it doesn't begin till halfway through, they do just that, with the unmasking combined with the final confrontation. Okay. Are you winning, Claudan? Nope, alright, we'll come back again later. Bloody hell. Imagine being the team responsible for remaking the unmasking scene. Talk about an uphill battle. Oi, Blowfish, wanna remake the restaurant scene in The Godfather? No, thank you. Oi, Blowfish. Want to remake the shower scene from Psycho? No, I don't. And neither do you, Gus Van Sant.
Oi, Blowfish.
Definitely not. Needless to say, it does not begin to live up to the original here. The 1925 film captures the passage from the source material with great accuracy. You live and breathe the horror that Christine and Eric both feel in that moment. With the 43 film, Rains refused to undergo elaborate makeup as part of his deal in accepting the role. He apparently did so out of fear of being typecast in such monstrous roles. In his defense, you could argue that this iteration of the Phantom, a much more emotional and pitiful take, doesn't require the unimaginable grotesque nature of Chaney's. True, but it doesn't stop it from being underwhelming, in comparison. Legendary makeup artist Jack Pierce created a new monstrous look, but was forced to keep reducing it and refining it until Rains finally approved. The producers accepted Rains' demands, as they were also afraid of accidentally offending World War II soldiers who had returned home. Perhaps out of the same reasoning, the final battle is not much of a battle at all. A gunshot brings down the roof, and that's that. No tension, no peril, just a cool shot, and then a mini monologue from Christine that acts as a eulogy for Claudine. It doesn't feel completely earned, as the pair barely interacted in this version. But thank God Christine redeems herself by choosing her career over either of these bumbling men. Good riddance, and good for you, Christine. Hey Phantom, oh my god, you're still going. Fuck it, I'm calling in the big guns. Send in the hopper.
I'm bringing it down!
I do lament the shift in focus away from horror, but horror is my personal preference, obviously. On its own merits, it is a marvel to watch in terms of production design and technicality. This was aimed at a wider audience than Universal's other monster films, playing up the romanticism, the comedy, and visual spectacle. Financially speaking, another fine choice on Universal's part. Phantom 1943 would become the studio's biggest hit at the time, and even secured 4 Academy Award nominations. Prior to this, not a single nomination had been graced upon the Universal monsters. The film ended up winning in 2 out of the 4 categories: cinematography and art direction. Well earned on both fronts. History would repeat itself. A potential sequel was greenlit, but failed due to availability of its star Phantom. The effort, however, did not go to waste this time. The script was reworked into its own standalone adventure, starring Boris Karloff. The climax! Definitely not to be confused with Climax. Boris, no! It retains some of the Phantom's spirit, featuring a murderous theatre worker who falls for a much younger singer, again played by Susanna Foster, and he strives to make her sing only for him. So yeah, basically still a sequel. Now then, my angels of music, it is time for the verdicts. Best Christine. Mary Philbin does a fantastic job with the terror scenes in 1925, but overall, I think Susanna Foster's Christine is a more assured character with more to do. And yeah, she does have one hell of a singing voice. Ah shit, did this just become a love pentagon? Kill. Not many kills to choose from across the 2 films, but even if there were loads, I know I'd still be choosing the Phantom's demise from the original movie. Sad, sinister, and action-packed all in one. This is the big question, isn't it? Like I hinted at before, it really depends on what you're looking for from your Phantoms. I adore Claude Rains' version in the first act, but once he actually becomes the Phantom, he just cannot compare to Chaney for me. As time has already proven, that is a performance for the ages. 1925 is the winner for me. Both are entertaining films, but the original is more consistent, holds a tremendous sense of atmosphere, and is suitably horrifying when it needs to be. Okay, friends of the Blowfish, your turn. Which version do you prefer? And indeed, what other versions of this tale do you gravitate towards? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching. Now, I am going to take a well-earned break in the sewers. Ciao ciao for now.